say. And right now it's going to share the PowerPoint. And so that's all they'll see. When you guys do Q&A, just stop the PowerPoint. And so the camera will then be focused on y'all.
Because I was thinking I would just be changing the slides when necessary. Is that right?
That was the plan for her to do it.
Oh, okay, so I saved that to you.
Yeah.
Oh, got it.
Yeah. And then
I have a question. The microphone, are we on mute right now or can people hear us?
people can hear us. Give me 1 second. All right. Let me run around to all of these and do this. Give me one.
And this is, when I do the intro, we have to speak in here, right? For the people online to hear us, or can they hear us right now?
They can hear us. Give me one. So I'm going to mute us if you have any.
Hi, everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to the workshop entitled Keeping Trans Children Safe, Using Trauma-Informed Practice as a Parent. Please remember to silence your phones during this presentation and remember to fill out the evaluations and turn them in to me before leaving the room. I want to remind you that if you applied for continuing ed units, you will need to complete the CEU course evaluation form and roster sign-in sheet at the registration table. And you can pick these forms up at the front desk or download them through Whova. This session, and without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Wolf and Debbie.
Hi, everyone. So we wanted to just really briefly introduce ourselves. And this is a pretty tight packed workshop with lots of stories, which was intentional. We'll talk about that. I'll introduce myself first. My name is Debbie Carlson. I use she, her pronouns, identify as a non-binary femme. And very briefly, my story is I came out as queer in the 90s. I then came out as femme in the early 2000s. I then came out as non-binary femme in the teens of the 2000s. So my gender identity has been progressive, and I have many coming out stories. And my perspective and where I come from is I identify as a non-binary feminist in my philosophy around gender identity, and we'll talk about that more. About what that looks like.
My name is Wolf. Let's see, I identify as a two-spirit. I'm mixed blood Alaskan Native and white. I grew up in Alaska. I am autistic and ADHD, and I have many coming out stories as well. I've been gender non-binary since the 1990s. and have been doing trans advocacy since the 90s, including helping with the San Francisco Trans March. Have been out and open for a gazillion years at this point.
And just for accessibility as well, I am white, I'm a white appearing woman, and I have my hair up with blue rimmed glasses and a pink top. And if you want to describe yourself as well.
Not really.
Okay. And so what we wanted to do is very briefly have introductions of you all, if you would like. And so we wanted to ask if you would say your name, your pronoun, and then any affiliation that you would like to share with us, whether that's as a parent, a mental health provider, educator, early learning provider. We would love to just kind of get a sense of the room, like, you know, what are some of the hats that you all wear? Would you mind starting?
My name's Allie Whitford, for she, her, and a friend of her woman. I am a psychiatric nurse practitioner, student graduate.
Cool, thank you.
I'm Sean, pronouns are he, him. I'm a parent of raised by a radical feminist or sensitive. Anyway, one of the rare white males. Anyway, so this is just really, you know, sparks some interest. All this stuff.
Cool, thank you. In fact, can you change the slide? I think we're in the intros. Would you mind going?
Sure, my name is Jamie. I identify as a white queer woman. I think that it's all child who went through various transitions, from male to gender fluid, to non-binary, to what they say was what they use to describe.
Uh-huh.
And then I'm not quite sure what at this point, you know, thing is that at work, Jazz changed her legal name.
Yeah.
I had to do that on the insurance form. There was no option other than male or female. And when I asked Jazz what the money would switch on there, it was, well, never going to be available again, so make your choice. But anyway, if we go up to that, okay.
Yeah,
And the, you know, things that have to do with my biological baby, what the dad wants to do.
Yeah.
My kids have grown up in Washington. Yeah, the one pride parades every single year. Both my kids have it.
so it's definitely what we call sometimes invisible emotional labor. Yeah. Thank you. How about starting in the back?
My name is Christine. I use she, her pronouns. I define assisted recovery support. We have a lot of transitioning questions. Here and
Thank you for being here.
this is my daughter.
Got it. Thank you. Welcome. And you?
Hi, I'm Mariah. Non-binary. I'm an early learning provider and a social worker. I have trans youth needs.
Mhm.
And I'm also the parent of a teenager who is developing their gender and sexual identity. Non-binary, who is in America and recently just changed their name.
Right. I hear that. So could you change the next slide, actually? So you all can look at this, but we wanted to also kind of frame this workshop. So we want to be really clear that this is coming from a parent-centered approach. This is a trauma-informed workshop, and we'll talk about what our definition of trauma-informed means. It's a gender-affirming lens as well in how we've approached this to parenting. And the reason why we are here and why we wanted to, and we're privileged, we feel very privileged to be able to be here, is as parents, we have felt really isolated, and it's been really hard to connect with other parents. In fact, we know parents, but not quite as young as our child when she came out. So we really wanted to, and we want to continue to create spaces where parents and providers can provide to create more community, and that's really our motivation. Our child came out to us at the age of 3, and we socially transitioned her. And we'll talk about that.
Which is not common.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's a very
our
young
research.
age to socially transition.
yeah.
So the first thing I'll say is that we take a very radical approach.
Yes, perhaps not typical. And so our definition, I wanted just to go into definitions. For us, trauma-informed, a trauma-informed lens means that when we're parenting and trying to understand our child, we know that it's recognizing a trauma-informed behavior, and just recognizing that there might be that part of the way that she is behaving is coming from a trauma-informed perspective. We have adopted her from the foster care system. And so we know, not the foster care system, but we adopted her, but we were former foster parents, foster to adopt. It also means to us, trauma-informed means that our lens is we're trying to create safety within, for our parenting. We're trying to create healing and thinking about healing within our parenting, as well as empowerment for our kiddo. Oh, and did you want to add anything?
I also think that one of the things that we think about when we're dealing with our kiddo is understanding that where they're coming from may be triggered off by something that happened, but also trauma is also playing into how they're reacting to it. So that actually makes a huge difference on how we approach the topic.
Right. When we talk about gender affirming, for us as a parent, it means that we're taking the lead from our child in how they identify and pronouns and so forth. It means that as parents, we're really centering her safety and her exploration of her gender identity. And you'll, as we tell our stories, you'll see how that comes out. And that for us, it also means that we are intentionally debunking the binary of gender that all of us have, grown up in that paradigm, and that we're creating a kind of a new non-binary in the way that we parent model, and and you'll see from our stories how we're trying to debunk kind of the restrictions of gender that we've all learned about, and really making sure that within our parenting, we're honoring both masculine and feminine in everyone. We are also with gender affirming care, it means for us is that we're really normalizing the exploration of gender, and that we're also, and you'll hear in our stories how our approach to really talking about or presenting how people's heart and mind connects with gender versus our genitalia. So we have a lot of we have a lot of interactions and talks about genitalia in our family, and really normalizing that. And from our perspective, we do not want our child to be diagnosed with gender dysphoria, because we're coming from a place that it is not, there's a historical perspective, and that it is part of the human experience to explore gender as human beings. And we don't want our child to be pathologized in their own exploration and their own identity. So
Explain, you said pathologize?
Mhm.
yes.
Explain that.
So there's a history within the mental health sector to label both people with different sexual orientations outside of heterosexual orientation as well as gender outside of the binary of both girl and boy. And so in the mental health industry or sector, there has been an evolution of how mental health providers think about the mental health of trans as well as gay, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual. That has traditionally been labeling with a diagnosis, that's basically an othering, and within gender identity, it's called gender dysphoria. And so mental health providers might diagnose a child or a youth or an adult with gender dysphoria.
Also, before we go too much further, in the past, in order to be able to get hormones
And
or
there's this
surgery
too,
or anything, you had to actually go to therapy. You had to live as the opposite sex. Go check out WPATH, which started in 1976, I think, is when the original trans healthcare, like trying to get people to follow a standard of care for trans folk, started in 1970 something. When Stanford started their transitioning people. So like there's a whole history about what it looks like, what you had to do. Like, for example, I was on hormones for a while. I was required to go to therapy. I was required to, all those things, because this is before these days where those things are no longer required.
Forced to do that, or you wouldn't get them.
Exactly. So that's when we talk about pathologizing, that's what we're talking about. So in our
It's changing
family,
now, it's better now.
it's way better now than it used to be, although it's still not great. Like, so if a female to male goes to the doctor and says, I want top surgery, and they're of a certain age, they can be denied if they're not on hormones. And so there's all kinds of funky things that are still happening that people don't know about.
A
So
lot of insurances they don't want it.
yeah, that's a whole other
That's a whole
topic.
other
It's a
topic.
whole other topic.
Yeah. You had a question.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that my insurance, I did have to have a formal diagnosis.
Yeah,
yep.
Anything like this, hormones, whatever.
So in our family, how we talk about it is some girls have penises, some
Well,
girls have
we're gonna get there
vaginas.
too.
Like that's how we're actually approaching it with our, right? So we're taking away that, I mean, plus as a trans advocate and as a trans person myself, I come from a place where people have all kinds of genitalia, and that doesn't have any effect on who they are as a person or how they identify.
And with that being said, also coming from a provider perspective, our family and our child has a mental health provider, and we've asked them not to put that in their records. And we've been intentional about that. And we know that, and we'll talk, this is part of our mental health section, but we know that if our child decides to go through, like, for example, surgery, to gender affirming surgery, that we have witnesses, both teachers, childcare providers, doctors, mental health, who can all be those witnesses to her journey, so that we want to debunk the need to have that as a diagnosis from the very beginning. And we've just thinking about that as well. I know we have a new person. We were just introducing ourselves just with our name and pronoun, and then any affiliation that you would like to identify with.
Julie from NAMI, Seattle. No affiliations, just worked for many years in vocational rehabilitation. I've been a user of the system and have family members. Ongoing lifetime issue, but yeah, I'm just curious. Interested in this topic.
And what pronouns do you use?
She, her.
Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Actually, I don't think I said my pronouns. I use both he and they.
So we want to move forward into this is where we are right now. The state are like our kiddos' stages of coming out. And we recognize that this isn't doctrine, but that journey is different for different people. But again, we wanted to share our experience particularly. And so just to back up, this is also in retrospect as well, as we realizing how our kid came out to us. Like I said, to put it into context, we through foster care, we got our kiddo at 2.5. We knew her before though, because our families are connected.
She's also our godchild.
Yeah, she was our godchild before this. And she came out to us at the age of 3 or almost
Almost
3.
3.5.
And so,
Almost 3.
and for us, like as soon as she came out, we listened for several months before we really socially transitioned her. What we know is through studies is that on average, children might start to show and communicate with their parents at the age of 4.5. And then on average, families will socially transition maybe around 6. This is average. Obviously, every family is different. And
Our kiddo was very adamant
Yeah.
about who she was. Very, very, very adamant.
yeah, and we want to just acknowledge that there's, different theories about socially transitioning, and there's a history of socially transitioning children that's very different than what we chose to do. And we want to acknowledge that. We want to acknowledge the activism of the trans community to really open up, and why some of y'all are here because you've been hearing about it, but that activism and that advocacy has really opened up how all of us humans now think about gender identity and so forth, and just wanted to acknowledge that. And when we talk about social transition, one of the concerns, especially from a medical provider or from a behavioral health provider, is there has been different theories on the impact of social transition, because some children also might identify as non-binary at a very young age, and they might transition to then a gendered, maybe to male or female. And it was believed previously that if you transitioned too early, that you would hurt a child because they have to transition back. The studies show that that's not true. Children, if they have to transition back, or they do because that's their gender journey, that it's not harming. In fact, but what is harming is if you don't transition, you're socially transition your child when they're really strongly identifying who they are, and you don't listen to them. There's a lot of studies that that's harming. And we, let's see. So we'll talk more about now with stories. And so what we thought we would do is talk about our child's transition, and I'll start. So for our kiddo, when we first got her, she refused to wear dark colors. At the age of 2.5, she would not wear blue. She refused to wear black. She refused to wear gray. She would not wear any colors except for bright colors. And that was interesting. We didn't, we're like, okay. Her style, she also did not want to wear what we would deem as more masculine clothing. This is at the age of 2.5. And so in a trauma-informed, gender-affirming way, we are listening and we're affirming and we're taking her lead. But we didn't think anything of it, to be honest. We're just like, okay, this is a preference. This is interesting. We're observing. Did you want to add anything around that, the clothing part?
Yeah, so there were, when she came to us, she had lots of jeans and lots of like button-down shirts and flannel shirts and things like that, right? And
She was a boy. She looked,
and she's like,
traditionally boy clothes.
no, I don't want to wear that. No, I'm not going to wear that. No, I don't like jeans. So Debbie started buying like leggings and bright colorful t-shirts and things like that. And when we would give the option, Because sometimes there were fits over what clothing came out of the drawer, right? So then, she would always choose the more colorful option, the leggings, things like that.
At daycare or at childcare, so we put our kiddo in childcare as soon as because we were both working parents. So she went into childcare at the very beginning. What we were told by her early learning teachers was that she didn't like playing aggressively. And that she tended to play with girls. So she was, and the childcare early learning people were, they took her lead and they didn't think anything of it. They just like, yeah, she just tends to play with the girls, less aggressive. And that's where she feels comfortable. She gets along with everybody, but that's where she feels the most comfortable. Yeah, so one of the things that we found with and the thing that was tough was this is during COVID, so we couldn't really observe her either. So we really had to rely on our teachers to tell us like, how is she interacting? Because that was the other thing, and this is maybe unusual for parents, is like during COVID, you don't get to really see how your kids interact all the time. So that was tough. Yeah.
They wouldn't let you install.
No, you're not allowed to have videos.
No, I mean, they provided videos, but they were just really short
Yeah.
as far as like early learning. And then the other thing about toys too is I bought her dolls because as a boy, I was I want everyone to, and this is our non-binary perspective, is that we want boys and girls, all genders, to understand nurturing. And so I bought her dolls, baby dolls, and as well as she had already trucks. So she had like lots of different toys that encompassed different, like both, in a gendered world, girls and boy toys essentially. And she did not like playing with dolls.
But she also didn't really like playing with the boy toys either.
She
so-
played with cars. She played with cars. But she went through a phase where she didn't play with a lot of toys. So again, we didn't really know that. And the reason why we're bringing up toys is that's often an indicator around gender, and also how we as parents in society kind of push gender on kiddos. So we're just noticing, okay, well, you don't like, like what toys do you like? And what we found is she wasn't a big toy player. She didn't play with toys a lot. So again, and when she would, it was with girls and whatever those toys were. So she did really love having a kitchen. So we played
Yeah,
with
lots of
food,
cooking.
cooking.
She liked cars though.
She
too,
she loves
but-
trains. So, that kind of, so
Yeah.
these were some of the toys that we were providing for her. And again, she hadn't transitioned yet. So this is when she was a boy, or still a boy. And I want to just also say, because this is important, and we'll hear later on why, is as somebody who's non-binary and also two-spirit and trans, we didn't talk about gender at all as parents. We didn't talk about gender. We weren't talking about gender at all. And clearly not sort of sexual orientation. So that was just not part of our parenting at all. And so that's why when at the age of 3, when she announced that she's a girl, we were like, interesting. Okay. And we didn't know where she got that particularly. We didn't know that she, and the reason why we're mentioning is there have been people in our community that started telling us, oh, that's why she's trans, is because of our identities. So I want to be really clear, like that is not. This was on her own, and she started announcing to us that she's a girl. The way she would introduce herself to new kids and parents is she would say, hi, I'm a girl, her name, I'm a girl, I use she, her pronouns.
A 3-year-old. A 3-year-old, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
did not say things like we use this, these are our pronouns. We're like, Oh,
That's pretty cool.
okay.
Yeah, because I didn't talk to her at all about being two-spirit, what that meant, none of those things,
Nothing,
right? Like those were
nothing.
not, that we did not have those conversations. She was too young to start having
Yeah.
those conversations, so.
She was very strong in her spirit. Yes.
Very, very.
How did you, because we have mom and dad, and those are gendered.
Yeah.
Well, we weren't parents
or you
at
weren't
that
parents.
time. We hadn't formally
that-
adopted her.
So that's the whole thing around foster care again. That, yeah, we first
So-
started off with our names and then we said, then we went with mama. I identify as mama, Mama Debbie,
Papa
Papa
Wolf.
Wolf. So we were gendered. And then we became mama and papa.
Yeah, but that was kind of like after she started identifying.
Yeah.
Right, like that was after we started having the gender conversations, did we actually start using mama and papa?
Yeah.
So all of this stuff happened before that even became a thing in our family.
Yeah. So why don't you talk a little bit about the potty training?
Oh, that was tough. So the thing about our kiddo is that we've had lots and lots of conversation about their genitalia, because they don't want the genitalia that they have. And so it always ends up in conversations with me, probably because I also identify as otherly gendered, trans, two-spirit, however, and I use he, him pronouns for the most part. So so we have a lot of conversations. So the whole potty training part was a lot of dislike for their genitalia. And so me having conversations with them about loving their body and all body parts are wee-wees. Like we talk about that, right? Like boys have wee-wees, girls have wee-wees.
No,
Like,
we
there's
say boys have vaginas, girls have vaginas. Girls have vaginas, boys have vaginas, but everybody has
has a
wee-wees.
wee-wees, yeah.
Everybody
And-
has a wee-wee. So
yeah.
she could use that for herself in a gender neutral term and talk about her genitalia. But, and so that was intentional, so that she could have language that belongs to her.
Yeah.
And fits within her sense of her own self.
That hasn't always been the case with other people we have found. But with the potty training, it was sitting down at first, and I tried to do the standing up, and she did not like that at all. Did not want to pee standing up, no matter what. And I was like, but isn't it kind of cool? You get to stand up. And she's like, yeah, no, I think I'll sit down. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. So we had to go through like, body care and what that looks like, and making sure that that they clean themselves up after pottying and all that kind of stuff. So we had lots and lots of conversations that it's different for different genitalia, but that genitalia doesn't make you a boy or a girl, like all of those conversations. And this is where the approach has become like really radical from what we understand, because a lot of people don't talk about it in those terms. Like if you're a boy, you have a penis. If you're a girl, you have a vagina. It's like, yeah, no, in our world, in our friend group, that's not always the case. And so that is not how we are parenting.
And so then in addition, one of the things as a parent, we were constantly thinking about is when she did, people who we all get potty trained, and you make mistakes, right? So part of our trauma informed care was when she would make mistakes, she'd be really hard on herself. I mean, crying, upset, disliking herself. And we knew that you couldn't separate her discomfort with her genitalia to making a mistake, which is coming from trauma, and being really down on yourself and knowing that maybe, you're unlovable because your birth mom gave you up. So that's part of the trauma that we know is part of her history. and knowing that we couldn't separate all of that complexity. So within within the care, the trauma-informed, gender-affirming care that we did around potty training, we really made sure that she knew that it's okay to make mistakes, that it's normal to make mistakes, that no matter what you do or say, mama and papa love you. So we're always like affirming and creating an atmosphere that she can make mistakes and that's okay, to the point where we're like, mama and papa sometimes pee in our pants. Like we had to, like we make mistakes. This is, and that, like that was really new for her
Yeah.
to and so that, and so I want to acknowledge that this might be similar to other ways people parent, but we understood the background of the why. And therefore that informed the way that we also parented too. And
I don't hear people say things like that to their kids, but I make a mistake and I go, I just made a mistake, And so I call it out and I bring it to her attention and I try to show her, okay, so I made that mistake. So now I need to go do this to rectify the mistake that I just made, right? And so like trying to make it a not big deal. And the potty training has been really rough because it has come down to, it's my wee-wee's fault. It's my wee-wee's fault. I hate my wee-wee. It does this, it does that. It's, and so these are the conversations we have to have. And part of that is the trauma, though, and also this is not the wee-wee that she wants, right? So these are the conversations that we're having to have at the same time.
so we wanted to just pause. We're going to talk about hair and body in more detail and with some stories, which is also part of her coming out story as well. But we wanted to just pause if there were any questions. And that's okay if there's not, but yeah,
So, go ahead.
she's 5.5.
So in daycare, going to the bathroom. There's no.
We're gonna
issue
get
with-
to bathrooms.
There's
That's
a whole section on
topic on
if we
itself.
get to that, sorry, we know that.
We're running out of time.
Yeah. So if you want to change, and yes, go ahead. You had a question.
Okay, just how old she is.
Oh, how old? Okay, thanks. So we wanted to talk about hair because that's a whole section in and of itself as well for trans people in general. And so our approach was that was definitely part of her coming out. She at the age of 3 knew that to be a girl in her heart, you had to have long hair. And so it was a huge issue that she had short hair and she didn't like her hair and she didn't feel like a girl. And it was very upsetting for her. And so we, in a gender affirming way, and again, we want to incorporate the trauma aspect that when we say that she would get upset, like it meant that there were temper tantrums, there were crying fits, there was just big episodes at times that concentrated on her hair because it wasn't in line with her understanding of her gender. And so what we did is, in a non-binary way, we talked about that girls have long hair and short hair, and that boys have long hair and short hair. And she listened, but all of her peers of girls had long hair at the time. So that was really where she got her cues, her gender cues. But we continued to have conversations. And one of the things that we knew about our kiddo is that hair as a concentrating point was also one way that she processed her gender. And so we would literally have conversations about hair every day for months. And just kind of really trying to keep the conversation open about what hair meant, that both boys and girls could have long hair and short hair. One of the things, and we remember this was a big deal, is that one of her childcare providers was a male who had a ponytail with long hair. And so it took us possibly months to convince her that girls could also have ponytails,
Mhm.
because she then identified that anyone with a ponytail was a boy. So again, she's taking her gender cues, like the adults in her life, about what is gender. And that was news to us. Like, we were learning about even how a young child takes cues around gender. But now she wears ponytails because she refused to, but now she will. And that was a big deal. Yeah, I know, we're gonna have to
We're gonna have
pick
to
it up.
kinda skip.
Will,
Go fast.
is there anything, we're gonna move on to language right now. Is there any questions around hair? I will say that in WOVA, we have a resource page, and there's a couple articles on hair that you can read and gain some more insight around.
We
if
have
you'd
a
like.
whole 2-page document with a bunch of links and stuff
Yeah.
for folks if you really want to go check things out.
So what we wanted to switch is around language, particularly pronouns, and even how we talk about our body, which we've talked a little bit about. So the conversations really around pronouns really accelerated when she was 4. And we actually expanded the vocabulary. When she was 3, we really just kept it about pronouns, and we didn't attach any labels like trans or non-binary or all genders. We really just kept it around pronouns. And it wasn't until the age of 4, and again, for her, that means that she had been processing and transitioning now for a year, is that we became more specific about kind of details and language around pronouns or around gender. We also incorporated, because at this time we were taking her lead, but we weren't sure, and we still don't know where she's going to land. So we also incorporated a lens of talking about that with gender, you can change your mind too. You can, and we also just incorporated a lesson that you can change your mind about a lot of things. Like, you like the color purple. Well, tomorrow you can like the color black. Like, just the concept that it's okay to change your mind, and that we're creating a family atmosphere that it's safe to do that. And so one of the things that we also talked about is that you can change your mind about how you feel in your gender today, or this week, or at this time, and like right now. So that was those were some of the techniques that we used. And we knew that from the very beginning, when she came out to us so strongly and told us what pronouns that she was using, we knew that, and then socially transitioning, that to support her in this process, this for her was leading with a healthy childhood development lens in her just in her childhood development, as well as her gender identity development. And so if you wanted to talk about oh yeah, so one of the things with Wolf, with our ritual, Wolf does the nighttime ritual, and that's when our kiddo would process a lot and have deeper conversations. So if you wanted to talk about your experience with that.
So we had a lot of conversations at night. So I'd go lay in bed with her and have conversations about lots of things, about what she was processing for the day. But she asked me a ton of questions. Like, once she realized that I don't identify as that I identify as Two-Spirit and what that means. And I just kept saying it over and over again. What does Two-Spirit mean? What does Two-Spirit mean? And then she's like, oh, you mean all genders? I said, kind of. It's like, it's a little different, but it's kind of. So we had lots of conversations about, like, what does that look like? And, that you can be, one day you could be a girl, one day you could be a boy, one day you could be a they, one day you could be a gender. Like, I just started incorporating, like, from minute to minute, you could be something different. Like, you get to make that choice about what that looks like for you, right? And so there was tons and tons of questions and tons of conversations about what they're like, well, sometimes I feel like this. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Well, you can feel like that anytime you want to, right? Like just kind of putting it as an opportunity for them to take a look at some point. So the conversations around what do pronouns mean and being able to be fluid in those pronouns has also given her the opportunity to make whatever choices she wants for herself.
And so there was what she has told us is that she sometimes feels like a girl and sometimes feels like all genders. And there have been times even since she's come out that she also uses they, them. So we introduced they, them and what it means. And she at times has told us that that really resonates with us, that she is a boy and a girl. And so we're listening to her story as she's figuring it out. And it's part of her processing is also that we would have conversations on a daily basis around pronouns as well. What I wanted to introduce you, because books was a huge also tool that we used. And so I wanted to share some of that, some of the books that we used. And again, this is as she progressed, and she's so young still, but as she progressed, like this book here, Who Are You? One of the things that we did is here's a gender wheel. And this is around body, identity, and expression. And this is something you can take out. People can take a look at it. There's a little button. I'm gonna share this. People can look at this. And you can switch around how you feel your body, your gender identity, and your expression. And this gave her, it gave her words so that, because if you can imagine at the age of 4, you're figuring out life in general and you're figuring out your gender when it's really no one, she's not talking to her peers about this, right? Like she has no one to talk to. So it was giving her building blocks to better understand herself. And I can remember when we first introduced her to this book, I'm Not a Girl. The first time I read this, she was so like just listening and just like, and then I could just feel her like thinking. And then she'd be like, I'm like this, or oh, I remember the last page in this. The boy got to cut her hair. This was a good hair book too. And she's like, I know, she really resonated with the book at this moment because hair was so huge for her. And so these books really gave her agency. This is a good book too. This is called My Maddie. This is about being non-binary and really introducing the concept as a parent who is non-binary, and you're welcome to look at this. I can pass this around. But just like letting her in stories. We were given this book, if anyone knows, Red, A Crayon Story, who thought, it's a crayon that has a red label, but colors in blue. So it's like different, these stories. Here's a book around gender and being you, and it's about pronouns and everybody having their own pronoun. So really just being able to see herself. This is a great book called My Rainbow, and this is about a trans autistic girl, and this is about hair. And again, like really resonating around hair is such a big deal. We're going to talk about other books around the body, but also our kiddo is, this was when she was still a baby, but this is a non-conforming book around for boys, but boys can be feminists too. But our kiddo is a Southeast Asian kiddo. So one of the things that we're doing also in our, in books and education is teaching her about the Hindi gods and about her heritage as well. And one of the things that we talk about is like some of the gods in these pictures, gods and goddesses, they're not the same type of gender that maybe American books are. So again, we talk about gender in a intersectional racial kind of racialized framework. And one of the things that I did too was because when she first came out, even at the age of 3 or 4, this is a picture and trying to have art for her to see herself. This is from a famous Indian woman artist. And it's a picture, obviously, of Indian women, right? And talking to her about, oh, this is you, you're an Indian girl, you know, and being able to see herself. So that's also the combination of healthy racial identity growth as well as gender growth. Yeah,
How old is your child today?
5.5. Yeah.
Still very young.
So she's in kindergarten now? or not?
Just starting
started.
kindergarten. Yeah,
Does she like kindergarten?
seems to love it so far.
So far,
Yeah, yeah.
we'll see. It just started this last week, so.
Yeah. So, oh, what's going on? Oh. So we wanted to change to body. So maybe the next slide. And so we've talked a little bit about her transition and her relationship with her body. One of the things that, and framing it from a you know, our gender affirming care and trauma informed care was, our attitude was that you couldn't talk too much. Like we never discouraged her from talking about hair, her body, her gender identity, her pronouns, because she needed to continually process that she needed to talk about it. So we would bring it up. We would ask her, you know, what gender, you know, what pronoun are you using now and why? And so we were engaging with her in these conversations. That was part of her processing. But, and we talked about, I'm gonna share the nude story right now.
Just the one- Okay. The
So
little kiddo one. Yeah.
one of the things to note, and we know that this is because for many reasons, but our kiddo did not like being naked. And so she always wore clothes from shirts, pants to socks. And we noticed that she just never just like hung out maybe with no shirt on or just like undies, never. And one of the things, and she didn't like changing in front of people. She didn't, except for us. So we really were intentional and protected her where she would just change in front of us. We just really took her lead in any type of social situation. There was a time when we were with some friends and it was like a kind of sort of like a
I think it was
retreat.
my
We were like,
birthday.
I think it was your birthday, and we had a bunch of friends over who had a little kiddo who was 2.5, and Bradley was, oh, sorry, our kiddo. I'm trying to not use. So our kiddo also has a gender neutral name, so the name change never happened for them for that reason. But our there was a moment where during this weekend, a friend of our friends had a little girl who was about 2.5 years old, who didn't like wearing clothes at all. So was always running around naked, basically, or just with diapers on. And for our kiddo, that was not their norm at all. And so there was this moment that, you know, our kiddo said to me, "Can I take off my shirt? And can I take off my shirt?" And I was like, "Of course." You know, and they were just so hesitant, but they wanted to be like this other kiddo. and so they just asked asked if they could take off, or she could take off her clothes, to the point where they were both naked and just playing. And this was a revolutionary, this was a really meaningful moment, where one, we had to ask the permission of, because our kiddo to that other kiddo was a girl. And so we need to also ask permission to the other parents if that's okay. How did they feel about it? They were fine. That these two kids with different types of bodies, but both girls, could be naked together. And they ran around naked. It was such a big deal for our kiddo, to the point where the other kiddo, who was like 2 at the time, also, they were looking at each other's genitalia. The other kiddo, just being a curious kid, touched our kiddo's genitalia, just that exploration.
Yeah.
And it was kind of right in front of us. And our kid, this was a big deal. And then, from that moment on, our kiddo wanted to be naked all the time. And finally got the freedom to feel okay with their body. That's what it meant for them. And so I wanted to share one of our books that I immediately went out and got. It was this book, and then It's Okay to Be
It's not rude to be nude.
Not Rude to Be Nude, which was a big one for, here it is. So again, we teach our kiddo through books. I got this one for our kiddo, and you can see, this is one about willies. So you can see the different types of bodies, and everybody has willies. And the theme, it's like intergenerational, all different body types, different disabilities, in different ages. And what we would do in both of these, and also in a lot of our books, because we were also teaching about race, is that I would ask our kiddo, what color are you? I would ask our kiddo, who are you in these books, so that she could see herself and reflect. And we then took on, and this is one of our themes, it isn't rude to be nude. And that was a big deal for her, because she just didn't feel comfortable with her body. And she had never been nude around another kiddo or anyone else besides us. And that was a developmental milestone for her. So we're gonna move on, unless there's any.
We had a lot more stories. But, we're gonna run out of time if we don't keep going.
So what we wanted to do is talk about mental health and navigating the mental health community. So because we were a foster care family, we were already tracked to have a mental health provider to help us in transition when our kiddo was in the foster care system. And so the specialty of the mental health provider was trauma-informed lens, as well as foster care. And in all of our interactions with mental health providers, people have been affirming, but not necessarily knowledgeable. So we had lots of questions around all the things that we're talking about. We didn't know, like all of these things we figured out for ourselves, and just what we did. We didn't know if this was right. We didn't know if this is going to work. We didn't know if this was the right approach. And so we had lots of questions to our mental health providers, but they just didn't know either. And
Part of that is because there's just not enough out there especially for kiddos as young as ours who come out. Right, like that was
part of for sure the barrier. However, so one of the things our first mental health provider we had at the age of 2.5, and they were with us for a year. Like I said, they were affirming. We then lost them because of insurance, and then it took me another year to find another mental health provider. So our kiddo, because we were from the foster care system, was screened early on for any type of disabilities or learning disabilities or emotional, social, emotional, developmental disabilities. And because of that screening, we then got into early preschool during COVID when it was all online, but with an IEP or individual education plan. And she then went into in-person, an SPP program within the public school around preschool with an IEP as well. And through the schools, how I asked and advocated for a mental health provider. And I was very clear, they have to be gender affirming. Our kid is trans. So one of our stories is that we're constantly coming out and navigating with all systems that our kid is trans. She's also a kid of color. So we need, yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Did the foster care system have a feeling that she was going to be trans and then specifically placed her with you? Or do you think the placement with you just made her so comfortable because of who the both of you are and how open and affirming you are? So you shook your heads, the foster care system had no idea.
Well, it was,
Yeah.
it's
It's a unique story.
a unique story. This is our godchild.
Oh, okay.
And so originally it was a volunteer
Yeah.
placement. We had gotten it's a long story.
That's
Anyway.
I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so our foster care, we fostered through Amara. They did not have any services for us to understand what was happening. Neither did the social care workers. And so we didn't go to them. We really relied more on our mental health provider and asked them questions. And again, they were affirming, but we had so many questions around how to developmentally navigate her gender journey that they just didn't know. And so that's why we're sharing these stories.
Also, like, part of this is because of my own story, right? Like, growing up as a differently gendered kid, I was always seen as a boy. I passed as a boy for most of my life until I was too old to pass, because I didn't have enough stubble or something, I don't know. But I no longer pass as a boy, but for decades and decades, I passed as a boy and I lived as a boy. And so my own story is also part of where the way that we raise our own kid now is, because I know what that feels like to be denied of who you are, right? Like, we were not going to do that to our kid.
So our philosophy is very much based on our lived experience. What I will say, and you weren't here, Lauren, before, but we talked about, when we first got our kiddo, we did not talk about gender at all, or our gender. So there was no conversation around gender. And then our kiddo came out to us in a very strong way that shocked us. And she told us she was a girl and that she uses she. So we have been asked that multiple times. Oh, is that why she's trans? Because you're so affirming. No.
I didn't think it was because you were affirming, but I was just wondering if like the placement was specifically
Oh yeah,
because
no.
of who you were, and
Yeah.
the foster system was actually working right. But now you explained it was about,
Yeah.
it was a kinship placement in a way.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we've kind of already talked about this, and again, our mental health providers have been very affirming. We said we do not want the diagnosis of gender dysphoria in her records, because we do not want to pathologize her. And our mental health providers have been very affirming and okay with that. So it's been great. And I think as parents, though, I think it is important to advocate along those lines, and know that there's other ways that if she does want to engage in surgery and gender transition services, that there's other ways that you can provide evidence, if you will, that this is the right choice. One of the things that's also worth noting for people and parents is that social transition, like we did at the age of 3, is not permanent. Hormonal blockers are not permanent. So if your child, if this is the right thing for your child to know that as they're leading their journey, they can always change their mind. It's not permanent. Surgery and transition or surgery obviously is. So that's still a journey that we're going to be engaging in. But when we were talking about this, that was actually really helpful for me to know that how we're engaging with our kids' journey, and these are not permanent, so that she has the self-agency to change her mind if she would like, and that, or not. And so I think I didn't know that. And so I want to share that with people from the very beginning. And so we're going to talk about now some of the crux. We're going to transition, to navigating systems. So the systems that we have been navigating are friends, family, our chosen family, childcare friends, schools, doctors, and mental health professionals, summer camps, like every single thing that we engage in, it is like we have to navigate that transition, or that we have to navigate that for our child. And so
including our own families.
Yeah. And so maybe we'll start there is I think it was at the age of 3 or 4, like both of us have a history where we've had to come out, and we've been navigating our own families as adults, though, not as children, but as adults. And both of our stories is that we've kind of put up with a lot with our family, in the sense that we haven't been fully supported. We've dealt with neglect. We've dealt with not being fully accepted. That's our own journey. And I know, I have my own therapist, and we knew that my parents, particularly not my dad particularly, we knew that they were not accepting. And they kept saying things like, why are you doing this? He's a boy. And we knew that Wolf parents were also not accepting. So we knew our families weren't accepting. And we had to make a choice. Actually, it was my therapist that pushed me, like, would you allow, because we were confused. We were like, God, we've been putting up with this. So should we also put up with this with their kid? And we had to make a clear distinction. And I have to say, it was my therapist that pushed me, like, here's your history, but are you going to allow your child to have the same history that you've had, that has been so hurtful and harmful and damaging and transphobic and homophobic?
Mm-hmm.
And we had a conversation, and we're like, no. So this was during the holidays. This is why we had this conversation.
Well, it came to a head. We've been having this conversation. We've been dealing with this for, the last couple of years, but over the holidays, it came to a head because she wanted to wear a very
that's right,
beautiful dress
for Christmas. Yeah. And
I was like, yeah,
this is our family.
so
They're
I'm
not
gonna
safe.
contact my family and say, you can't say jack. If you're anything but if you are anything but accepting with her, we will leave. I am done dealing with your comments, with your whatever, like, you will be accepting of my child, or we will not come.
Yeah, so we set up meetings with our families, including, because my brother, one of my brothers also, our kiddo would hang out with our niece, and we would get these like stink eye stares from my brother and kind of my sister-in-law. I mean, we had to navigate a lot. And we had separate conversations with all of our family. We said, we're not tolerating this. We will not share this holiday with you. We're prepared to like leave or not be engaged. If you want to have a relationship with us, here are our boundaries. It wasn't about us. It was about our kid. Like, because our main point was that this little being needs to feel safe and be safe. So that was hard. This was a big transitional moment for us because we had never said this or advocated in this way for ourselves.
Ever.
We were much more tolerant with our parents. We're from a generation where we were just more tolerant, and we knew that we had to step it up. We had to step up our game in order to make sure that our kiddo was safe. And so not only did we have conversations, but we specifically identified behavior that was unacceptable. So we said, no, we're like, no mistakes with gender. We said
Pronoun usage.
no, right, pronoun usage,
No
no
comments.
comments. We were really specific about what could happen, what couldn't happen. And what we were also really specific around is that we're not asking you to accept, but we're asking you to tolerate. And this is what it looks like. So we're not going to change your mind. Your mind is set up about how your philosophy is around gender, but this is the behavior. This is what we expect. And the reason why is because our kid deserves to be safe. So we were really clear about those boundaries and having those conversations. And then we asked, do you agree? And they all ended up saying yes. And so we came into the holiday with her with this beautiful dress that she was so proud of, and she was feeling so good in, and she was accepted, and the behavior was consistent with what we asked.
Mhm.
So that though took a lot of energy, as you can imagine. What's up?
I'm empathizing with you. I'm just laughing in
Yeah.
because I can imagine the energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with your parents, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not an easy conversation to have to just put I mean, as an autistic ADHD person, there are times when I can just, I will dig my heels in and that's it. You're not budging me. I don't care what you say or what you think or whatever, and I don't care who you are. I can give a shit if you were the president of the United States. I could give a shit if you're God. If I've dug my heels in, I have dug my heels in. But it's a whole different story when you're talking about your parents. And in the Native community, that's a whole other thing. So, yeah.
So we also wanted to share some stories like around childcare. Our kiddo transitioned in childcare. And like we said,
They're actually really good.
yeah, the early learning providers were really, really good. They were very, very supportive. But but the kiddos weren't.
Yeah.
Like there was like our kiddo was getting misgendered. It was really upsetting to her. And so we had conversations with parents because some of her best friends were misgendering her, and it really was upsetting. So some of the parents outreached, and we gave them lists of books so that they could have dialogue with their kiddos around what this meant. And again, because of COVID, we didn't know the impact, but we're still in contact with some of our kiddos' friends from daycare, even though we go to different schools, we go to birthday parties and things. And just recently we went to a birthday party where there was a kiddo who wasn't a close friend of our kiddos, but who was impacted because he was a boy, and he said, oh, does our kiddo, is she a girl? And this is to me. And I was like, yeah, she is. And he immediately said, well, I'm a boy. And I was like, okay. And the mom was just like, do you remember how we talked about this? And this was a really telling moment where we're like, oh, we're even having an impact with other families and how they're talking about gender and with their kiddos, and that it might even enforce gender for other kiddos too. And that's good. Like that dialogue is what we want to be having, and we feel honored to be part of their journey too. I wanted to share another story around bathrooms, and we haven't even totally got there yet, but there was a moment where we were at a farmer's market and we ended up meeting a kiddo from our preschool, and they were all girls. And so I was kind of, parenting this group of girls, and we were trying to look for a bathroom. And we were at the library, and this other girl who's a little bit older, she's like, oh, let's go in this group. It was like a handicapped wheelchair bathroom. So it was bigger. And I knew at that moment, if we were all going to go to the bathroom, that would not be safe for our kiddo. And so having to think really quickly, I'm like, how do I get us to a single stall bathroom? Like, these are the type of things that we have to navigate on a daily basis. And I got us there so that our kiddo could be in a stall by herself and still go to the bathroom safely and not be outed. But this is just an example. I was like, I can't believe that so I was just being able to finesse, oh, let's go into this single stall bathroom really quickly so that our kiddo's gender identity stays hers. Right. But these are just like the everyday. Go ahead.
We have to have these conversations with institutions too, right? So for the school, we're like, what kind of bathrooms do you have? Are they single stall bathrooms? Like, these are the conversations we have to consistently have no matter where we go. And I think we didn't really talk about we're coming from a feminist lens, right? So the part of the thing that I think about a lot is that if this world wasn't quite so sexist, it wouldn't have such a huge problem with the masculine to feminine. They have less of a problem with the quote unquote feminine to masculine, but the masculine to feminine is the ultimate undoing, right? So these are things we have to think about, right? We don't have these conversations with our kid. Our kid is far too young to have these conversations, but we have to think about her safety constantly. No matter what we do, we have to make sure that the school knows that if our kiddo has to go to the doctor, there has to be an advocate with her in that ambulance ride to the hospital, through the hospital, until we get there. There has to be a gender affirming advocate with her at all times, right? Like, these are things that we have to navigate that other parents don't have to do that, right? But that ensures her safety, and that we're not running into transphobic doctors, which I've run into a shit ton in my lifetime, excuse my language. But these are just some examples of things that we have to think about all the time, no matter where we go or what we're doing.
So one of the things that we wanted to share too is the bathing suit. The bathing suits are very gendered. I've never really thought about it.
I have.
Well, I haven't to this extent. So we had our kiddo go to swimming lessons, and we had to be really cognizant of what I'm now calling an all genders swimsuit outfit, if you will. So what was really important to our kiddo was that, just like other girls, that she had a top, and whether it was a bikini and or a one piece. But because she also has a penis, we did not want to out her. So I always had her wear a trunk, which fortunately right now, that's kind of the style a little bit for girls. So we were able to get away with it. And she didn't think about it at all, but there was intentionality for us, because we also, like Wolf is saying, we're always thinking about how to protect her, to not out her, and that she gets to live her life in her gender. And so that was a big deal. And then we had this big, and then I told you about the nude story. So she likes to be nude more. And here's the feminist moment, and I think some people will appreciate this, is that she was at summer camp where they have water days. And she was asking, and all of the camp counselors knew that she was trans. She was asking, why can I have my top off? Like the boys, essentially, like, why can't I, why can't I have my top on or off? And they were very intentional and like, well, we want to ask your parents to see what's the right, gender norm for you. And our attitude as feminists is like, girls can have to be topless, So we were like, well, let's let our kiddo, basically let her lead that. And so that can be not necessarily about gender for her, but it can be for others, right? And just like having to navigate that. So that's one story that we were able to, I really appreciated the camp counselors' intentionality and asking us and then having that conversation with us first. And then we had the conversation with our kiddo about gender and the gendered of having a top or not top, which I so appreciated.
We gotta wrap it up.
I know.
I
So
have a question.
yeah, please.
Okay. So I missed the beginning, sorry about that, running around. And I have the benefit of knowing you both, and like, this is awesome. What I don't know, and maybe you talked about this, is like, you've had to figure all this out on your own. There are no resources
There's
to
none.
help parents whose kids come to them, especially this young. So, when's the book coming out? When are you starting your own,
No.
taking Debbie Carlson and Wolf Painter Consulting? No, seriously, like,
I thought about creating a website with all the resources that we found. The
did you
books,
find
the,
anything anywhere on the
No,
World
no.
Wide Web about?
Not this early,
not this young.
not this young.
No, there's nobody that we know of that has a kid.
Or
this
yeah, we don't
young
have a
that-
peer
So
family.
y'all. this
I'm
is-
sure they're out there. I'm
this is
positive
great
they're
for
out
you
there.
because
We
you're-
just
you're
haven't
using-
found them.
They're creating the world of reference.
Well, and that's why we wanted to
Yep, it's
do this,
awesome.
and thank you so much for letting us.
I'm gonna
is just-
get you.
Is just sharing our story. And even for educators and mental health providers. Okay. That we want to share these stories that you could even provide a little guidance if you have parents that are also in the same situation. And we want to, we want to do this workshop again. And are talking to different entities to do that as well. So we would love to keep providing that. And then also we wanted to meet parents, or we desperately want to meet other parents and swap stories and continue to go deeper in the way that we go about doing this, because we just haven't found anything. And what we will say is we did search out, and there's a resource called Trans Families, and they have a support group for parents, and they have a support group of LGBTQ parents for trans or non-binary kids. But even there, the parents that we've met, their kids transitioned later,
A lot older.
a lot older is like 9, it's still young. But for us, that's
Yeah, but
quite
there's
a bit,
actually quite a
older.
bit difference.
Yeah,
in
developmentally, for sure.
Developmentally, right, between the two ages, so.
Yeah. So we know we're almost out of time. And we have a lot more stories, but we want to be cognizant of just giving space to you all if you have any particular questions or even questions about what we've said so far, and or comments, observations, musings.
So getting back to the bathrooms.
Yeah.
Nationwide, especially racist states like Florida, whatever, but they're not, they're just like, I think, or there's some states, like California, our state, that are getting more to where neutral unisex bathrooms and stuff like that, no?
I have been having bathroom issues forever.
Really?
And it didn't matter when I was younger and I was passing as a boy, it didn't matter what bathroom I went into. I got told I was in the wrong bathroom. And I could go into one bathroom and they're like, you're in the wrong bathroom. So I go to the other, you're in the wrong bathroom. It didn't matter where I went, right? So this has been
This was what we were just doing.
historically a place
Sorry.
of trauma for me. I
Yeah,
don't
the next
want it
one
to be a place of trauma
is
for my
where we're
kids,
at.
so I
Yeah.
make sure that I always
Sorry,
use the
I didn't
women's
tell you
restroom
to
with
switch
them,
it.
because that's the restroom they prefer to use.
Are they trying to do more unison for that?
No, they are not. They are not. They're,
I would
it-
say I'd say societally we are.
I would disagree with that.
Yeah, yeah, that's okay. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I
Amanda.
was thinking of the trauma piece because when she was born, I was caught up right after that. And I went to the pediatrician and said, what's the most traumatic? That a child that's born both genders are androgynous and our society is so binary that the parent has to make a decision right then. And we don't have any room for flexibility, right?
Right.
Like that girl and Bella. So that's just a no at birth that can be right off the bat. And then.
So that would be intersex.
intersex,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we said, because like I said, society wants to.
Right.
We don't have time to let that. Family. and
Yeah.
child explore that.
Right.
And come to the decision. So then the other thing I was thinking that I, as a parent, she had a younger brother who loved her clothes and they were more comfortable. It had nothing to do with gender. It was just. more
Yeah.
comfort. He told me I hate
Totally.
swim trunks, they hang up on my legs and they bug me. I like my girls swimsuit better. He liked that he said,
Yeah.
it wasn't hanging there wet. And I didn't make a big deal. His father had a big meltdown. Like,
Yeah.
Let's do that, let's do that. I'm like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, so, so I think in some
Yeah.
ways, that's what's comfortable.
Yeah.
It really matters.
But-
So, and I'm working on
Yeah.
this, my own thing is I'm so programmed, binary programming, it's like power, it's gender. And it,
Yeah,
so I'm just saying, I am in the process too, and I'm not as humans, we're discussing the subject and realizing that. And there's lots of approaches and nuance to how and so thanks for sharing.
yeah.
And you think
I'm gonna let this person go. You had your hand up and then,
No, I guess I was only gonna say about the gender bathroom. I work for the state, pretty much every state agency has gender. Bathrooms, the bathroom that you are.
yeah,
At the agency level.
Yeah, it was a huge discussion, and I
Yeah.
guess, and a lot of people use, say what their pronouns are, when you're sitting in line. And my hope is that, having those steps, that those people would be more gender affirming.
you know what,
Whether they
what
be
I've,
she,
yeah.
he, they, them,
Yeah.
whatever.
what we've noticed, I've noticed, I'm gonna speak for myself and then we have a couple, is that there's a lot of fear and resistance sometimes to that conversation. But what we've noticed with our family is when we share deeper, like, here, this is what our kiddo did, like, without, just like the humanizing. So I know that there's a couple, go ahead.
So is there any like way to help friends that are in that kind of situation?
In what?
If
are
they're,
they
if they're,
transitioning?
Like being bullied because there's.
ooh,
That's a tough one. Because bullying comes from a different place. That's a part of the transphobia, sexism crap that we have in our society. So,
I have multiple friends and one of my friends, she, her parents do not support her for being trans, and they call her rude names and stuff and say that she's a disgrace because she doesn't want to be what she was born.
right,
right.
But then my friend Lulu, her parents, well, her mom is very transphobic, while her dad is very supportive.
uh-huh,
And so they're right now going through this thing where Lulu and her dad are moving out of that house and going to find a different house because Lulu's two parents have been broken up for about a year.
Mhm.
I think it is important around the parents, so, like, encouraging the resource of trans families, because that is a place where parents can talk out their own transphobia in a safe place. Like, it's not being policed in the way that you need to say anything. And I think that it's really important that parents get that journey and get the space to learn. And recognize that the end goal is that your child is safe, that they're not suicidal, that they're not all of these things. That's the end goal, and that you don't need to change. But it is actually by law, we have to keep our kids safe, actually. But that doesn't always know.
That
that
it
people-
doesn't, it's
like,
not quite
that's-
the same, like the safety that they're talking about and the safety that we're talking about are two totally different kinds of safety. right?
And so unfortunately, like this, we could go on and we're happy to stay,
Yeah.
but it is 2:30. So we also want to just acknowledge that if people need to leave, we're happy to have deeper conversations and
We probably
provide.
need to vacate the room so
we-
they can be out there.
Yes, so we need to vacate the room so we
Yeah.
can go out there too. I just want to say this has been a privilege to share with you. Thank you so much for listening,
you.
your questions. Thank you so much.
If you want to sign in, the sign sheet is in the very back. Please do so before you leave.
Very informative.
So glad, good,
And
yeah.
then also we have surveys or you can do that. Give her to yourself and do the survey real quick. The link that's in there. I believe so. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
So good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
I do want to get together.
I know, well,
Oh, yeah, I started taking all the books. and people were asking questions.
Well, I know you're busy, so now is not the right time, but then let's connect. And it's so good to see you in the flesh.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah. And I didn't mean to be like writing a note, like in the
But
middle of
let's
you.
connect.
Yes,
For sure.
please.
Okay. Would love to do that. Oh, thank you.